as it would be or as it will be someday when we're in heaven, and we have perfect faith. So this is where the Hebrew superlative came in when Yeshua was teaching those verily, verily passages, right? Like one of the well-known ones, verily, verily, doesn't he say, unless a man be born again? And Nicodemus, who was a teacher, he would have had the responsibility to respond at the end of that teaching that Yeshua gave him. He would have known that with amen, amen. But instead of that, what did he respond with? Lord, how can these things be? He was struggling. And just like we do sometimes, he went off script. His scripted answer was supposed to be amen, amen. Yes, teacher. God's, I'm speaking in faith that God's going to give me the perfect faith to believe what you're saying. But instead of that, it was so tough for him to swallow that he went off script, and he's like, oh, Lord, I don't know how that can be. Probably an example of a bad question, by the way. The Lord had mercy on him.
Knowledge.
But you see a little Jewish understanding behind the passage there. To a Jewish audience reading that, they would pick up on that. They'd say, whoa, this Nicodemus is a leader. He's a teacher that's high ranking, and even a young child would know to respond, amen, amen. I mean, that's cheeky to respond the way Nicodemus responded to Yeshua. That's asking for a little, a little chastisement from the teacher to go off script like that and say that. And but the Lord's used to it, and He has mercy on us. So, and I do that all the time with the Lord, believe me, because He shocks me with His statements and questions to me, and then I'll be like, Lord, like I told you, I argue with Him, and He's merciful. He asked me a question, and then in the process of answering it, I realized, which, by the way, it reminds me of the book title I saw in the bookstore one time. It said, God is speaking to me, and it sounds a lot like my wife. And I've often had this experience where Nina and I will have a conversation, and she'll give me the answer up front, the right answer to what we're talking about, and I'll say, well, no, that's not it. And I'll go around and I'll reason it out, and we'll go back and forth for 20 minutes, and then at the end, I'll say, oh, I just said what you just said in the beginning, didn't I? So I had to go through the process to get there, and the Lord does that to me. And then I'll say, oh, okay, I really do agree. I just had to work through the steps to get there. So that's the Hebrew superlative. Now let me give you another example, which this one I really like. It's one of my favorites. Deuteronomy chapter 28. Now, Deuteronomy 28 is a well-known passage. People quote it all the time, right? Oh, I'm having a little trouble here where I got to click on it. Oh, there, I got it. Okay. So I might have to make it a little smaller just for a minute here. No, that's not working. Okay. We'll get it. Okay. So it says, it shall come to pass if thou shalt hearken diligently. Now, different translations will translate that differently, but I think the King James has diligently listen or something along those lines. And what that is, now this one is Shema, Shema. And over here in the Hebrew side, I don't know if you've heard this Hebrew word, but it's a well-known Hebrew word. Shema means to listen. It's in the Great Commandment, it says, Hear, O Israel, right? The first word of Hear, O Israel is Shema. And the rabbis call that the Shema, right? And if I say to any Jew around the world, I'll say the Shema, they know to fill in the rest. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. That one word that refers to that entire passage. Now, in this case, what it does is it's Shema and then Tishma. It's still the word Shema repeated, but it conjugates it. That second conjugation of the word Shema is see, how would I put this in English? I'd say listen and continue listening. So it's putting it in the continuous action tense. I don't know if that's technically the correct terminology for that tense, but that's my paraphrase of what you'd call that tense. The tishma is like saying it's imperfect tense, I think is what it's called technically. It means the action has not been completed. So this is ongoing action, right? We're not finished with this yet. So you're not just going to listen one time and then you're done, but you're going to stay in a place of listening, 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 and listening. So you have two things going on here. You have the tense of the continual listening, but you also have the word Shema repeated twice. And let's go back to the whiteboard and I'll show you what I mean here. Again, I'm going to use my example of song and sing or singer. So you don't let this throw you off, right? Maybe a better example might even be like, this is improper grammar, but if I said sing, sings in English, just to make it really obvious, you would understand that even though this one is, the second one's conjugated differently than the first one, it's still the same word repeated twice. So when you look in eSword, which I forgot to open, but I'm going to open right now. I don't know, Graham and Margaret, if you've heard of eSword. I use it quite a bit. It's a very convenient tool. It's free. A Wesleyan guy came up with it. It's just the scriptures. You download it, and then you can use it online or offline. And once it's downloaded into your computer, you don't have to have connection to the internet to use it. And he has a paid portion that you can buy extras, but he has quite a significant that's free. And here I'm going to show you in a second what it looks like. I highly recommend. It's been around for about 20 years, so it's very proven. It's not a new thing. So here's what it looks like. See all these tabs here at the top? These are different Bible versions, and I only have the free stuff. I don't have any of the paid stuff. So if I go to KJV, there I have the King James, and I can make it a little bigger if I want to, right? And if I go to Deuteronomy 28, which is what I want to do in this case, verse 1, and you can see in the King James this shalt hearken diligently. See there that thou shalt, they're trying to get that tishma in there, that imperfect tense of continuous action. So they'll translate it sort of as a future tense. That's the King James translators trying to figure out how do we translate this Hebrew thing that doesn't exist in English, this Hebrew tense of continuous action. So they're saying, okay, we're going to go with future. It's not finished yet. So shalt, if thou shalt hearken diligently. But really what it's saying in the Hebrew is it's present tense and future. Right? It's present tense, but it's not finished. It's not a one-time action. It's over and over and over until God says it's done. So shall diligently hearken. Now, if I want to see it in the Strong's Concordance, if I hit my little King James Plus and I come to here, can you see that on your screen? It says Hebrew word 8085, and it says it twice here.
Shema.
It's Shema, Shema. But the Strong's is good about it because they'll let you know when there's a Hebrew superlative, because they'll actually put it in there twice.
Mm-hmm.
To let you know, if you look in the Hebrew text, that word is repeated twice. That same root word of Shema, Shema is repeated twice. Now, they won't tell you that it's Shema Tishma, that it's conjugated. They'll just tell you the base word and that the base word is repeated twice. So like I said, what you have going on there is you have two different messages being communicated simultaneously in the Hebrew. One is the conjugation of the word, right? So Shema is the command form, what we call the imperative. Hebrew has a special conjugation when it's command form that's different than the regular. So if I'm just saying, I will listen, that's a different conjugation than if I'm saying a command form, like I say to my son, listen, right? Listen up. So this Shema is command form, listen. But then it says Tishma, which, like I said, the closest English that you could come up with, it doesn't really exist in English exactly, but we would call that future tense. And this is where, when you get out of the Greek thinking and into the Hebrew, the longer you interact with the Hebrew, it stretches your mind. You might get a headache sometimes and have to take a break and ask the Lord for help, because it doesn't exist in English. And so it's like, well, it's the same, but not really. It's not exactly the same. There's a little extra in the Hebrew. So it's future tense, but it's not just future tense. It's continuous action. So you're going to keep doing this over and over and over until it's done. So I was trying to think of a good analogy. If one of you thinks of a good analogy, give me one.
Faith. You continue faith and you continue having faith.
Yeah, that's a good example. So this is what's happening in Deuteronomy 28 when it says diligently hearken. It's actually a Hebrew superlative. So I've actually heard it preached wrongfully, not intentionally, but I've heard it preached as diligently listen to strive in the flesh. If I really get in the flesh and work really, really, really hard at this, then I'll get the promise. Remember I talked about the Hebrew superlative? You have a order issued in the courts of heaven, and how does that execute it upon the earth? I pull it down by meeting the scriptural condition. So this is the scriptural condition in the verse, is if you will diligently listen. Now that's a pretty obvious one, but a lot of times people brush past it, and they're like, oh, here's the promise, yay, right? Because then it says all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee. Now in the Hebrew, I heard Joyce Meyer talk about that once. She got it right. She's a good student when she gets into Hebrew, I've noticed. But she said that this verse 2, she had someone come up on the stage and chase her around the stage. And she said this in the Hebrew, the way it's worded and the tenses of the conjugation of the words there indicates something chasing you. So the blessings, it's like you're walking or running down the street, and the blessings are running behind you, trying to jump on you and catch you.